Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told His podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into a name everyone knows, but maybe not the full story behind it. Gabrielle Bonheur, Coco Chanel.
Oh, definitely. More than just a fashion icon, she's a legend.
Exactly. And forget dry biographies. We're aiming for an adventure today, exploring the life, the ambition, the twist.
And the controversies, too, let's be honest.
Absolutely. Our mission is really to peel back the layers, understand the forces that created this titan we think we know.
And it starts pretty dramatically, doesn't it? Her beginning is almost shrouded in, well, deliberate mystery.
Right. Born in a poorhouse, Saumur, 1883. And even her name on the birth certificate.
It was wrong. Registered as Chasnel, Chasnel, a clerical error.
And she kept that misspelling her whole life.
She did. Which makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe a way to distance herself from those very humble beginnings right from the start. That desire to control the narrative seems to be there early on.
It really does. And life didn't get easier immediately. Her mother died when she was just 11.
Yeah, a huge blow. And her father, well, he essentially abandoned the children. Gabrielle and her sisters ended up in a convent orphanage in Abyssine.
Pretty stark upbringing. But, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
That's where she learned to sew, inside those convent walls, the very skill that would, define her entire future.
It's incredible. Talk about finding your path in an unexpected place. And it contrasts so sharply with the story she told later.
Oh, the story she spun, claiming her father went off to seek his fortune in America.
Right, and that she lived with wealthy aunts. She even changed her birth year sometimes.
It shows that fierce determination to craft her own image, to be the author of her own story, even if it meant bending the truth.
Definitely. A powerful reminder for anyone listening. The stories we tell matter.
So from the orphanage, the next chapter is quite a leap.
It is. She starts working as a seamstress, but also tries her hand at singing in a cabaret in Moulins.
And this is where Coco comes in, right? The nickname.
Yes. Though the origin is a bit murky, could be from a song she sang, Who Has Seen Coco?
Or maybe Coco Rico.
Or, a bit more provocatively, maybe a reference to cocotte, the French word for a kept woman. We don't know for sure.
Adds to the mystique, I suppose. But a serious stage career wasn't really on the cards.
Apparently not. Her singing voice was described as marginal, but this period was absolutely crucial because it led her to Etienne Balsan.
Ah, Balsan, the wealthy textile heir and ex-cavalry officer.
Exactly. She became his mistress, and suddenly she's living in a chateau surrounded by luxury, horses, a whole different social set.
Talk about a change of scenery from Abyssine.
A complete world away, and being exposed to that life, that opulence, it must have ignited something in her.
You think that's where the design ideas really started percolating?
Well, that's where she started designing hats, initially just as a hobby, something to do while living this life of leisure.
A pastime that turned into, well, everything.
Pretty much. But it wasn't Balsan who financed her first proper venture. That was someone else.
Right, enter Captain Arthur Edward Bois-Sipel.
Yes, another key figure. Wealthy, English, upper class, part of Balsan's circle. They started an affair around 1908, and he saw the potential.
He set her up in a Paris apartment.
And, crucially, provided the financial backing for her first shop, Chanel Modes, on a Rue Cambon in 1910.
But just hats initially, wasn't it?
That's right. Because the location already had a dressmaker, she was restricted to millinery at first, kind of starting small, focused.
But those hats must have been something special.
They clearly were. The big break came when the famous actress Gabrielle Dorziat wore her hats in a play.
Ah, instant publicity.
Exactly. That really put her on the map.
And Capel kept supporting her ambitions.
He did. In 1913, he funded her next big step, a boutique in the chic seaside resort of Deauville.
Okay, Deauville. This feels like a turning point.
It really was. Because this is where she moved beyond hats and started introducing clothing. And not just any clothing.
This is the Jersey story, isn't it?
This is the Jersey story. She took this humble fabric, jersey knit, which, as you said earlier, was primarily used for men's underwear, and turned it into luxurious casual sportswear for wealthy women. Sailor blouses, relaxed sweaters, easy jackets. It was revolutionary.
Totally challenging the stiff, corseted haute couture of the time. Offering comfort, practicality, liberation, really.
And she was clever about marketing it, too.
How so?
She had her sister Antoinette and her Aunt Adrienne wear her designs and just walk around town, stroll along the boardwalks, living mannequins, basically.
Brilliant. Simple, effective, personal.
Very. And it worked. Then came 1915 wartime. She opens another boutique, this time in Biarritz, down near the Spanish border.
Smart move, catering to the wealthy Spanish clients and others escaping the war further north.
Extremely smart and incredibly successful. So successful, in fact, that she repaid Boy Capel's entire investment within just 1 year.
Wow, that speaks volumes about her drive and business sense already.
Absolutely. Biarritz was also where she met Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich of Russia.
Another significant connection.
Yes, they had a relationship, and that Russian influence would pop up in her designs later. But the big milestone comes in 1919.
Back to Paris.
Back to Paris. She establishes her proper couture house at 31 Rue Cambon, the address that becomes legendary.
The heart of the empire.
Yeah.
And she didn't stop there, did she? She kept expanding on that street.
No, eventually she owned, I think, 5 properties along Rue Cambon. It became a whole world clothing, hats, accessories, eventually jewelry and fragrances, a complete lifestyle brand before that term even existed.
Her vision was so holistic. And it went beyond fashion, too, like designing for the Ballet Russes.
Right, working with Sergei Diaghilev. That showed her artistic range and plugged her into the avant-garde cultural scene. Very savvy.
And then comes, arguably, her most famous creation, but also a source of massive future conflict.
Chanel number 5.
Launched in the early 20s, but the big business move was 1924.
The partnership with the Wertheimer brothers, Pierre and Paul, to create Parfums Chanel for production and distribution.
And the deal she struck, looking back, it seems, well, not great for her.
Not great at all. She licensed her name, essentially, for only 10% of the stock in the perfume company. The Wertheimers got 70%. The department store founder who brokered the deal got 20%.
Only 10%. For the Chanel number 5.
Yep. A decision she came to bitterly regret. She spent decades fighting it, trying to renegotiate. Famously called Pierre Wertheimer the bandit who screwed me.
Oof. Strong words. Shows that fiery side again.
Definitely. She felt cheated and wasn't afraid to say so.
Okay, so the business is booming, but her personal life is also taking some interesting turns. Connections to British aristocracy.
Yes. Through a woman named Vera Bate Lombardi, she gets introduced into the highest echelons of British society. We're talking Winston Churchill.
Wow.
And crucially, Hugh Grosvenor, the second Duke of Westminster, immensely wealthy, known as Bendor.
And they had a long affair, didn't they?
About 10 years, and it brought her, well, even more status and incredible wealth. He lavished her with gifts, amazing jewels, art, even a house in London's Mayfair district.
She was really moving in rarefied circles.
Absolutely. Those sources suggest his own strong anti-Semitism might have reinforced her own prejudices during this time.
That's a darker aspect we need to touch on later.
Yeah.
And also her connection with Paula Reeb around then.
Yes, the designer Paula Reeb. They were close, romantically involved later, and he ran this ultra-nationalist, anti-Semitic newsletter that Chanel apparently financed. It's uncomfortable.
It is. But despite these intense, long relationships, Balsan, Capel, the Duke, Reeb, she never married.
Never. And she had that amazing quote about the Duke of Westminster.
Oh, yes. There have been several Duchesses of Westminster. There's only one Chanel.
Boom. That says it all, doesn't it? Her commitment was ultimately to herself and her work.
Unshakable self-belief. So after the highs of European society, she gets tempted by Hollywood.
Briefly, yes. 1931, Samuel Goldwyn offers her $1 million, an enormous sum, then to come design costumes.
$1 million?
I know! She worked with stars like Gloria Swanson, Ina Claire, but she hated it.
Really? Why?
She found Hollywood infantile, the capital of bad taste. Her understated style just didn't quite mesh with the glamour factory, I think.
Interesting. So, not a successful venture in her eyes.
Not creatively fulfilling, it seems, and personally, more loss followed. Her relationship with the poet Pierre Reverdy was significant. Some think he even helped write her famous maxims.
Oh, interesting.
And then Paula Reeb, who she was deeply connected with, died suddenly in 1935. That hit her hard.
A lot of intense connections, and then loss.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the world changes dramatically.
World War II, 1939, and Chanel makes a very controversial move.
She closes her couture house.
Just like that. Shutters it completely, putting around 4,000 people out of work.
Why? Just because of the war?
That was the stated reason. But some speculate it was also a bit of payback for earlier labor strikes she'd faced. It's debated.
And during the Nazi occupation of Paris, Her living arrangements were also quite notable,
Extremely notable. She lived at the Hotel Ritz.
which was also the preferred residence for many high-ranking German officers.
Precisely. And her ability to stay there, live relatively comfortably during the occupation, was facilitated by her affair with a German officer, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage.
Dinklage. He wasn't just a diplomat, was he? There were suspicions.
Strong suspicions, yes. Widely believed to be involved in German intelligence. A spy.
Okay, so living at the Ritz, involved with a German officer, and then her attempt to regain control of the perfume business.
Yes, this is where it gets really troubling. Using the Nazis' anti-Jewish laws, the Aryanization laws, she tried to wrest control of Parfums Chanel from the Wertheimers, arguing they were Jewish and their ownership should be forfeit.
That's quite a move, using Nazi laws for personal gain.
It's a deeply controversial part of her story, but the Wertheimers had been smart.
How so?
Anticipating trouble, they had already, back in 1940, legally transferred ownership of the company to a non-Jewish French businessman, Félix Amiot, for the duration of the war.
So her attempts failed.
It failed. Amiot held the company and returned it to the Wertheimers after the war, but the attempt itself speaks volumes.
And the allegations about her own activities during the war go even further, don't they?
They do. Declassified intelligence documents surfaced much later, suggesting she was actually registered as a German agent. Agent F7124, codename Westminster.
Westminster. A nod to the Duke.
Presumably. And there's the story of Operation Model Hut, Operation Model Hat.
Okay, what was that?
Allegedly, it was a plan hatched in 1943 by the SS. The idea was to use Chanel's connection to Winston Churchill. Remember, they knew each other from her time with the Duke.
Right.
To send feelers about a potential separate peace between the SS and the Allies behind Hitler's back.
Wow. That sounds like something out of a spy thriller.
It really does. They apparently recruited her, and she in turn tried to involve Vera Bate Lombardi, that same woman who introduced her to British society.
Did Lombardi know what she was getting into?
Apparently not the full extent, but when she realized the implications during a trip to Madrid, she actually denounced Chanel to the British embassy there, calling her a Nazi spy.
Incredible. So what happened after the war? She faced charges.
She was interrogated after the liberation of Paris, yes. But ultimately, she was never charged with collaboration.
Why not, given all these allegations?
That's the million-dollar question. The most common theory, fueled by hints in released documents and memoirs, is that Winston Churchill personally intervened to protect her.
Her old friend.
Possibly. It's never been definitively proven, but the lack of charges, despite the suspicions, remains highly controversial.
So after all that, she leaves France.
Yes, she spends several years in sort of self-imposed exile in Switzerland, living quietly, relatively speaking.
But Chanel wasn't one to stay quiet forever.
Not at all. In 1954, age 71, she decides it's time for a comeback. She returns to Paris to reopen her couture house.
At 71, that takes guts. But where did the funding come from this time?
Ironically, from Pierre Wertheimer.
The bandit.
The very same. He apparently saw it as a way to protect his investment in Parfums Chanel. If the couture house was active and successful again, it boosted the perfume's image. A purely business decision, it seems.
Fascinating twist. And how was the comeback received?
Initially, the French press was pretty hostile. They hadn't forgotten the war years. But the American and British press loved it. They hailed it as a triumphant return, embraced the classic Chanel style again. So internationally, it was a huge success.
She managed it again. But what was she like in those later years?
By most accounts, quite lonely. Still working tirelessly, but increasingly isolated and apparently quite tyrannical with her staff.
But complex figure right to the end.
Very complex. She died in 1971 at the Hotel Ritz, where she had lived for so many years. She's 87.
Her funeral was a major event, I imagine.
Oh, yes. Packed with fashion figures, society names. But even then, the shadows lingered. There was talk of a national tribute, but the wartime collaboration stories resurfaced and sort of put a damper on that.
Her legacy is just so layered. Professionally groundbreaking, personally complicated.
Exactly. You can't deny her impact as a designer. She fundamentally changed how women dressed. That sporty, casual, chic, liberating women from corsets, that's immense.
The use of jersey, obviously.
Yeah.
The tweed suit.
Iconic. Designed for movement, for comfort. Still relevant today.
The Slavic influences you mentioned from her time with Dmitri.
Yes, the embroidery, the shapes in the early 20s. She collaborated with Russian emigre artisans like the House Kitmir, added a unique flavor.
And her signatures, the camellia flower.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, she loved the novel La Dame aux Camélias, about a courtesan who wore them, maybe a little nod to her own unconventional path. It became a house code.
And the little black dress, the LBD.
A revolution in itself, taking black, previously associated mainly with mourning or service, and making it the definition of chic, versatile, accessible elegance.
Truly democratic fashion. And her approach to jewelry, too, mixing fine and costume pieces.
Very modern. Again, breaking down old hierarchies. It wasn't about the intrinsic value necessarily, but the style, the look.
And the quilted bag, the 2.55.
Inspired by soldiers' bags, she wanted something practical, hands-free. That chain strap, supposedly inspired by the chains the nuns used for keys at the orphanage. The burgundy lining, the color of the orphanage uniform. It's full of her personal history.
Wow, I didn't know all those details were potentially linked back to her past.
It adds another layer, doesn't it? Even making suntans fashionable. Before her, pale skin was prized. She came back from a trip to the Riviera tan, and suddenly, a tan meant leisure, health, privilege.
She really did shape modern aesthetics in so many ways. It's no wonder her life is still explored in films and plays.
Absolutely. That complexity, that mix of genius and controversy, it's endlessly fascinating.
And you found a really great detail that captures her impact, didn't you? About the LBD.
Oh, yeah, this is brilliant. In 1926, American Vogue magazine featured her little black dress and compared it to the Ford automobile.
The Ford car, like the Model T.
Exactly. They called it Chanel's Ford, saying it was a design that would become ubiquitous, simple, accessible, almost universally worn, like the car that was revolutionizing transport.
That's an incredible comparison. A dress as revolutionary as the Ford. It puts her influence in such sharp perspective.
Isn't it just, it shows how people saw her designs not just as clothes, but as modern, functional, game-changing objects.
What a perfect snapshot of her impact.
Yeah.
You know, if you're finding this story as compelling as we are, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly here on Tell Me More, and you won't want to miss the next one.
Absolutely, because Coco Chanel, what a figure, a true paradox. Innovator, liberator of fashion, sharp businesswoman.
But also ruthless, controversial, deeply entangled in the darkest period of the 20th century.
Her story forces you to think about how we separate the art from the artist, or if we even should. She reshaped fashion, but her life choices were complicated.
Like a powerful reminder that icons are rarely simple. They're human, full of contradictions. So what part of Chanel's journey stands out most to you listening? What questions do you still have?
There's always more to uncover. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of Coco Chanel on Tell Me More Stories Told as podcasts.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.